Today, Christianity is inseparable from the Bible. But what about the time before it existed? For nearly 4 centuries, Christians lived, died, and preached without the book that now defines their faith. No chapters, no verses, no complete New Testament. How did they know what to believe? Who decided what was true? And what, after all, did they read, if they read anything at all? The answer is very different from what you might imagine. In the early years after Christ, there was no organized Christianity as a religion. There were small groups of followers, Jews and Gentiles, scattered throughout the Roman Empire. They gathered in homes, caves, or catacombs. And faith didn't come from a book, but from the living memory of the apostles. Peter, John, Paul, James, they were the ones who recounted what they had seen. The words of Jesus were passed down by word of mouth, remembered, repeated, and sung in hymns and prayers. The oral tradition was the heart of the faith. And that's how Christianity grew, without paper, without ink, and sustained by faith. Over time, the apostles and their disciples began writing letters. Paul wrote to the communities he founded. John and Peter also sent messages of advice and warning. These letters, the epistles, circulated among the churches. They were copied by hand, read aloud during gatherings, and then passed along. At the same time, accounts of Jesus' life began to appear, what we now call the Gospels. But back then, no one said, "This is the official book." They were simply testimonies, written by those who had known Jesus or his direct followers. During the first centuries, Christians didn't have a complete book, but they had a living church. Teachings were transmitted through tradition and liturgy. The rituals, prayers, and even the songs preserved the teachings of Christ. And that tradition was considered a divine authority. Meanwhile, hundreds of different texts appeared. Gospels, letters, prophecies, revelations. Some were genuine, others dubious. Many of these are what we now call apocryphal texts. The problem was that no one knew exactly which books could be trusted. Each community had its own copies and collections. By the 2nd century, Christianity had already spread throughout the empire. But the diversity of writings caused confusion. There were secret gospels, Gnostic groups, and contradictory teachings. It was in this context that the church realized the need to define a canon, a list of authentic texts aligned with the original faith. But that didn't happen overnight. It took more than 300 years for the New Testament to be officially recognized. Before that, what kept Christians united wasn't a book, it was the church itself. Authority came from the community, the bishops, and apostolic succession, men who claimed to have received their teaching directly from the apostles. While Christians sought to preserve their faith, the Roman Empire sought to destroy it. Copies of the texts were burned. Leaders were executed. Many believers died simply because they refused to deny Christ. And paradoxically, that persecution strengthened the faith. The oral stories, the hymns, and the secretly copied letters kept the memory of Jesus alive, long before a single unified book existed. Only in the 4th century, when Christianity became legal under Emperor Constantine, did the church gain the freedom to organize its texts. At councils, bishops gathered and compared writings. They analyzed style, doctrine, origin, and use among the communities. That's how the New Testament canon was born. 27 books chosen from dozens of others, Gospels, letters, and Revelation. But it's worth remembering. The church came before the Bible. It wasn't the Bible that created the church. It was the church that recognized which writings expressed the faith it had already lived for centuries. Even after that, the Bible's story continued to evolve. During the Middle Ages, copies were made by hand in Latin, and only with the invention of the printing press in the 15th century did it become the most reproduced book in history. But for a long time, Christians didn't read their faith. They lived it. The gospel was preached, heard, sung, and remembered. Faith was not found on pages, but in the church's collective memory. So what did Christians do before the Bible existed? They listened to stories, repeated prayers, shared bread and wine. They lived the faith as tradition, not through reading. Before the holy book there was community, and before the written word there was the spoken word.